Alright, hello everyone. In this video what we're going to do is we're going to be taking a look at three different methods for having one object follow another. Chances are is the first two are all you're going to need, but the third one is there in case you want to take a look at some deeper solutions or you need very specific solutions. So I'll try to be quick with this. Feel free to, ask me questions and so forth. Now, the very first method is used whenever an object is going to be following another object for the entire shot. So if the character is always going to be holding on to a fork, a plate, a box, whatever the case may be, this method is for you. Basically, it will allow you to just simply link one object to the other and be done with it. So, for example, the way that this works is you go up to the upper left-hand corner of the screen, you click on the link tool, click on your object, in this case the box, and then click and drag from the box onto the object you want it to follow. In this case, we want it to follow the hand controller. Now, why did we choose a hand controller? Well, the hand controller is the most exposed universal controller for this particular hand. We could always use the palm if we wanted to. But typically you wouldn't use anything else around the hand. A lot of times people will put a little pointer or helper object right there for these sort of attachments. But in our case, we have the palm of the hand, and we also have the control object here. Okay, so now with this linked together, as I move the hand, the box will move with it, including rotations. Now, you'll notice that as I rotate it, it's rotating around a similar axis, and it's kind of getting, it's moving a lot from its current location. The way that you avoid this, or the way that you correct this, is you have the box basically be very close to its driving object. So if the hand was now controlling this object, you can see that it responds in a much more realistic way or anticipated way. Okay, so that's all that would be required in that particular situation where you have one object following another object throughout the entire animation. Now you may run into some problems linking these hands to other objects because they have tons of controllers on them, getting them to behave in special ways. So instead, you would have other objects linked to these. Alright. Now for the next one, we're going to need a little bit of an animation to demonstrate the process here. So I'm going to take the hand. Oops. Now notice how it's still moving. We do not want this to be linked anymore. So to remove that, we select our box, go to the top left of the screen and click on Unlink. Then we take this hand and we drag it, and we want to put it right on the box here. And the idea is that the hand is going to move down to frame 10, grab the box, move it away, place it down, leave the box there, and then come back down. Okay, so very crude animation, but the idea here is that the hand will go grab the box, grab the object, bring it up, drop it off, and then go back to a resting pose without the box. Okay, so this probably represents the majority of the scenes that people are going to be dealing with, where they'll have something like a fork that needs to be placed on the plate for a short period of time while the character does something, and then the character picks it back up. So, how do we do this? Well, just like before, we select our object, then this time we go up to the animation menu at the very top of the screen. go to Constraints, and go to Link Constraint. We now click on the object that we want it to follow. And this should take you to the motion panel. If it doesn't, be sure to go there because that's where all of our settings are. Now from here, you're going to notice that right at the beginning, it says control right arm hand at frame 0. This is just fine. This just basically means that starting from frame 0, as I play this back, you can see that the box is following along the hand just like we were using before. Nothing different. However, what we want is we want a little bit more control, and we actually want it to start off independent of the hand. So the way that we do this is we need to add a link to the world at the beginning. Now notice what happened here. As soon as I did that, it basically moved the object pretty much down to where the origin is. And this is a common thing. It's kind of annoying, but you'll have to position your object back to where it was. One way that I use to get around that is I'll put a temporary object in its place. And then that way when this new object gets moved way off where it's supposed to be, I'll just use the align tool to snap it back to where it's supposed to be. Alright, so here we have this, and you'll notice that the hand is moving independent. The box is independent as well. Now at frame 10, we now want the box to follow the hand. So we click on Add Link, and we click on the target, or the control object for the hand. Now, from this point on, the box is going to follow the hand, just as we expected. Now at this point, we want it to go back to the world. So with Add Link disabled, we click on Link to World. Now notice how it didn't snap here, which is a good thing. That would have been a real pain in the ass. Alright, so here we have a hand going down, grabbing it, putting it up, and then coming back down to a rest. So this is a way that we can drop objects off, pick them up, and continue on our way. Now, one thing to keep in mind for this, and this is what another reason, as if you didn't have enough already, another reason to make sure that these control objects are close to the hand. If I drag these down, let's go to, if I drag these over, notice how it separates in a weird way. Okay, so it's important to have the objects together. And so if you have this connection there and you want to adjust the animation, you can easily do so. Bring it down, and you're all done. Now, one thing to be very careful of here is that the hand controller in the motion panel has a link constraint on it as well, so that it'll actually follow the world here. And so when you're switching between these objects, make very, very sure that you have the right object selected. If you don't, you're going to start animating and adding links to the wrong thing. It's going to totally screw up your animation, and you're going to be in a world of hurt. So just make sure that you're paying attention to which object you have selected. One way that I like to do this is by going over to the little plus sign in your viewport, go to Configure Viewports, and make sure that Display Selected with Edge Faces is on. This will make it quite clear what you currently have selected. Okay, so now the final one is probably the most complex, and this is using position constraints and so forth to get what we want. Now, The time when you would want to use this is, say for example, you wanted the object to follow the hand or follow the wrist, but then you were going to position and adjust the hand as a whole relative to the object. So for example, you're carrying a large box and then you want to kind of work your hand underneath the box, but still have it kind of follow along to cut down on the number of keyframes that you need. This is when you would use this particular technique. So in this case, if we select our object, go over to first, this requires some preparation. We want to select our object, go to Align, and click on the object we're going to align it to. We want to make sure that these settings are XYZ, pivot point, and then XYZ for the orientation as well. Now what we want to do is we want to offset the object from the control object so that we get a nice rotation and control later on. So the way that we do this is still with our object selected. We'll go into local coordinate system, click on Affect Object Only, and then we're just going to move the object to where we would like it to be when it's attached. And then when we're done, we just click on Affect Object Only again. And then we take our object and move it back to where it's supposed to be. Again, little helper objects can speed up the process a little bit. Or just duplicate the object and be sure to align using the center options. Okay, instead of pivot. Okay, so now with this selected, we're going to go up to Animation, Constraints, Position Constraint. We click on the control object, in this case the hand, and you'll notice over in the motion panel we have our position list opening up. At the very base, or at the bottom, we have XYZ at 100%, and then we have position constraint at 100%. So basically this position constraint, which we just added, overwrites the position XYZ. If we drop this down, you'll notice that it slowly moves back to where it started from. And so what we can do here is we can make a decision in terms of how do we actually want this object to start. So if I double click on the position XYZ, you can see I can freely move it around. If I now take this and align it back to our object, turn off the orientation, and then we go back to the position constraint and drag it up, you'll notice that as I move this on and off, it doesn't move the object anymore. If I take the hand controller and move it, you can see that it's following the arm, just as we'd expect. But if I set the constraint to 0 and move it around, it is now totally free. So that's great. However, one of the problems that we have here is once this position constraint is at 100%, we can no longer move our object. So the way that we get around this is we add another position XYZ after the constraint. And this allows us to basically offset this object from wherever this constraint is. So if we open up Position, underneath Assign Controller, click on Available, click on Assign Controller, and then go down to Position XYZ. We assign that. You'll notice we still can't move it. That's because our active controller is still position constraint. So we double click on the position XYZ at the bottom, and now we can move this around freely, and it will still follow the arm. if we take this object and drop down the constraint, you'll notice that's still shifting around. And so the way that you would work with this, which is one of the reasons why we set up the pivot points for this object to be, aligned with the with the control object, is we would go here, let's say frame 5, make sure our weight has a little key assigned to it, go to the very next frame, set it to 100. Okay, so we immediately jump to the right location. Before that, we use the align tool to get the object where we want it to be. And so here we use the align tool again on this frame to make sure that it's in the right location. There we go. So now it should be following. Now if we grab the control object, it should be following just fine. If we go before frame 5, it should be independent. So you're going to be finding yourself doing a lot of little tweaks actually. And here, let me go to frame 0, do another align to get the object where it needs to be. Alright, so what you would do in this case, instead of just adding link here, link there, you would be animating these position constraints on and off in single frame switches. So much like when we were dealing with IK and FK, you would go to a frame. In this case, we want to turn it off, so we make sure we have a little key, go to the very next frame, turn it off. At this point, we snap it using the align tool, and we go back a frame, and we make sure that it's snapped there as well. So now at this point, if we move the object around, or using the control object, it should be independent, which it is. So obviously it's a little more complex, a little bit more to deal with, but it does separate the position from the orientation. Now there is one other thing that I forgot to mention regarding the link constraint, which with linking, that may be appealing to you for various animations. So if we have our object here, and currently it has all this stuff on it, so we're just going to delete actually these two just to get back to where we were, just to demonstrate a concept here. Okay, so we have this animation, and we'll just bring the character's hands all the way up. And we just want the object to follow the palms. So we're going to select our box just like before, go up to animation, constraints, link constraint, click on the palm of our hand. And as you can see, it's moving up, it's rotating, and doing about everything we would expect it to do, because it's just linking, it's just following it, just like everything else. Now, inside of 3D Studio Max, there's the ability to constrain or limit what an object will inherit from its parent. So if we go up to the hierarchy menu, go over to link info, you can see down here that it has various things of inheritance. As I rotate this, you'll notice that the box is no longer rotating with the palm of the hand. You can choose to include one or all of these. Now you want to do this at a time when they are aligned. As you'll notice, as I turn these on, it didn't snap back to how it should be. Okay, so you want to make sure that if you're turning these things on and off, you do it at the right point where they are aligned. Okay, so there we go. We have the object following along, and we can always animate it separately. Okay, so that'll basically do it for this video. Feel free to ask me questions. I highly doubt you're going to need the position constraint, especially when you can use a link constraint and then just turn off various inheritance to get the movement that you need. If you still have problems or you need to deal with the position constraint or rotation constraint or orientation constraint, let me know. They are a little bit more cumbersome to work with, but they can do the job just as well. Alright, hope it helps. Take care.